let's cross over first to Hangzhou to take a look at the guest reception held by President Xi Jinping and Madame Peng Liyuan. They are receiving the guests attending the G20 summit in Hangzhou at Xizi Hotel, and now they're meeting UN Secretary General Ban Ki-moon and his wife. Now we have IM Chief Christine Lagarde receiving the reception of President Xi Jinping and his wife. The world leaders are attending the G20 summit. Will dine later at this five-star Zhejiang Xizi Hotel near Westlake in Hangzhou. And now we are having the governor of the World Bank, Jim Yong Kim, and now here's Roberto Azevedo, Director General of the WTO, and his wife, of course.
Thank you very much.
You're watching our special coverage of the G20 summit, and now President Xi Jinping and his wife are receiving guests attending the G20 summit. Here's the President of South Africa, Jacob Zuma. This is his second visit to China already this year as the president. It's Park Geun-hye, President of South Korea, Park Geun-hye, being received by President and his wife, Peng Liyuan. And this is the leader of the European Union. And this is a French President, François Hollande, being received by President Xi Jinping and his wife, Madame Peng Liyuan. And we have Prime Minister of Singapore, Lee Hsien Loong, and his wife. And China and Singapore actually established the China-Singapore Joint Council for Bilateral Cooperation in 2003, and is now enjoying very good relations. And this is Jose Angel Gria Trevino, Secretary General of the Organization for Economic Cooperation and Development. And this is Joseph Carney, Chairman of G20 Financial Stability Board, Mark. And we have Donald Tusk, European Council President, and his wife. You're watching our special coverage of the G20 summit. President Xi Jinping and his wife, Madame Peng Liyuan, is receiving guests attending the summit. And this is Thailand Prime Minister Prayut Chan-o-cha and his wife.
澳大利亚总理特恩普尔。
And we have now Australian Prime Minister Malcolm Turnbull. This is actually Turnbull's second visit to China since he took office in 2015.
老挝国家主席本扬和夫人。
And this is President Bunang Rachis of Laos and his wife. Laos is the ASEAN chair for 2016, and the president represents the organization of the Southeast Asian countries at this year's G20
巴
summit.
西总统特梅尔。
And this is Brazil President Michel Temer. He just took place, the former President Dilma Rousseff, to be the new leader of the country.
日本首相安倍晋三。
This is Shinzo Abe, the Japanese Prime Minister. We just finished a meeting with Russian President Vladimir Putin about territorial issues and economic relations in Vladivostok, Russia.
俄罗斯总统普京。
And we have now Vladimir Putin, Russian President. This is Putin's second visit to China already this year.
印度总理莫迪。
This is Indian Prime Minister Narendra Modi. And the last time he was in China was for a state visit in May last year. That visit took him to the cities of Xi'an, Beijing, and Shanghai. And now he's in Hangzhou for the G20 summit.
国际劳工组织总干事莱德和夫人。
Now we have Guy Ryder, Director General of the International Labour Organization. The ILO is a Geneva-based UN agency and mainly deals with issues related to international labor standards, social protection, and work opportunities for laborers.
乍得总统代表。
And this is the President of Idris Deby of Chad. And this is Egyptian President Abdel Fattah el-Sisi. It's the first time that Egypt ever participated in the G20 summit.
沙特阿拉伯王储继承人穆罕默德。
This is Saudi Arabia's Deputy Crown Prince Mohammed bin Salman.
英国首相特丽莎梅。
And we have UK Prime Minister Theresa May. It marks May's first visit to China since replacing David Cameron as the new leader of UK following the controversial Brexit referendum 3 months ago.
加拿大总理特鲁多和夫人。
And this is Canadian Prime Minister Justin Trudeau and his wife. They actually have brought their little daughter to Hangzhou to attend the G20 summit as well. This is Trudeau's first visit to China since he took office last year.
塞内加尔总统萨勒。
And this is President Macky Sall of Senegal. Senegal is a core member of the economic community of West African states. The country is also currently coordinating an economic development program within the African Union.
土耳其总统埃尔多安和夫人。
This is Recep Tayyip Erdogan, President of Turkey. This is Erdogan's second visit to China as the nation's president. And last year's G20 summit was held in Turkey's Antalya province. He's now attending the G20 summit in Hangzhou together with his wife. And we have now Mexican President Enrique Peña Nieto and his wife. Mexico hosted the 7th G20 summit in Los Cabos town in 2012. And this is President of Indonesia, Joko Widodo, and his wife. This is Widodo's third visit to China as president. His last visit to China was in 2015 when he also attended the Boao Forum for Asia in China's Hainan province. And President of Kazakhstan, Sultan Nazarbayev. And he's paying a 5-day working visit to China, began on Thursday. He has invited to attend the G20 summit as head of the state of a guest country. And we have now Prime Minister Mariano Rajoy, Prime Minister of Spain. Spain is not a member of the G20, but has been invited to the Hangzhou summit as a guest country. We have now President of Argentina, Mauricio Macri. This is his first visit to China since he took office in 2015. He's now here together with his wife to attend the G20 summit. Argentina is now bidding for the host country of the G20 summit in 2018. We have now Italian Prime Minister Matteo Renzi. This is Renzi's second visit to China since he took office in 2014. Italy was hit massively by an earthquake last month, which killed 300 people. Now we have US President Barack Obama. It's Obama's third visit to China already and his 11th trip to Asia since he took office in 2009. Of course, we all know that US is the largest economy in the G20. The country has also hosted 2 summits in 2008 and 2009. Now we have the German Chancellor Angela Merkel. This is Merkel's 10th visit to China since he took office in 2005. 10 visits to China, more than any other Western leader. And this number shows how close China and Germany have become in the past decade. Indeed, over the years, Germany has remained China's biggest trading partner within the European Union, with a trading volume close to that of Britain, France, and Italy combined. Now, you've been watching our special coverage of the G20 summit, and just now President Xi Jinping and his wife, Madame Peng Liyuan, have received the guests attending the G20 summit and who is going to dine at the Xizi Hotel, Zhejiang Xizi Hotel, at their site of the West Lake, a very famous scenic spot of the hosting city of Hangzhou. And now let's get back to our studio guest today, Professor Liu Baocheng and Mr. Einar Tangen, our current affairs commentator. We've been talking about the climate change agreement reached at this, yes, quite achievement indeed. Professor Liu, the Secretary General of the UN, was very happy to see that happening indeed. And when we talk about that, the relations between China and the US have actually reached beyond their own interests. Indeed, it goes further beyond into the international stage, like climate change, like anti-terrorism and cybersecurity, etc. and etc. Do you think that China should more actively participate in world affairs, for instance, setting up more international rules and more active in terms of international responsibility?
I think in the climate change agreement, the biggest achievement is to nail down the United States because they normally propose rules and then they don't follow. And now
do you think that it's time for China to make a change?
That's right. I think now China is
All right,
also playing a
we
very
have to leave it
important
here
role
and get back to Hangzhou, to Xizi Hotel, where the guests of the G20 summit are going to take a family photo. And afterwards, they will dine at this five-star Zhejiang Xizi Hotel near Westlake in Hangzhou City. And about this hotel, they are currently gathering. It stretches more than 1,500 meters long. The very famous Qihu Lake in the city. And the hotels, as we can see from the picture, has pavilions and pagoda styled like Chinese ancient gardens. It was originally a tea house built in 1927 by a merchant. And Chairman Mao Zedong also stayed here many times. And the Westlake, the most famous scenic spot, surrounds Xizi Hotel on three sides, making the hotel an ideal sightseeing spot in the city. So from the hotel, one would see beautiful scenery such as sunset glow at Leifeng Pagoda, three pools mirroring the moon. Very, very beautiful scenic spots in Hangzhou indeed. And about Hangzhou itself, which is currently hosting the 2016 G20 summit, is with its time-honored history, breathtaking scenery and rich culture, is one of the most attractive cities in China. And as the old Chinese saying about the country's ancient sites going, above there is paradise, below there is Suzhou, and Hangzhou highlights just how idyllic Hangzhou can be. There's a 13th century Italian traveler Marco Polo described the city as the finest and most splendid city in the world. And Hangzhou is now currently holding, as we mentioned, a 2016 G20 summit on September the 4th and 5th. The summit actually kicked off this morning with a speech made by President Xi Jinping. And the G20 summit's theme will be building an innovative, invigorated, interconnected and inclusive world economy. And you can see from the picture that the guests of the G20 member countries and also guest countries attending the summit are taking a family photo together, symbolizing the great unity that they are having, or actually they should have, in dealing with the current economic uncertainties in the world. They're going into the Xizi Hotel to dine afterwards. And after that, a grand gala directed by the famous director Zhang Yimou, Chinese film director Zhang Yimou, is going to take place, which is really worth anticipating indeed. All right, now let's get back to our studio guest today and talk about more about the G20 summit. It is indeed the relations between China and the US is very much crucial to the current world, not only economic situation but also political situation as well. But with the development of Chinese economy, US is not quite happy to see something happening. For instance, the AIIB and the RMBs joining SDR, for instance. But the relations between the two countries is indeed very crucial to the world economic situation.
Well, it's like in a sports race. You know, the one that you are most unhappy with is the one that is following your heat. So now China is the second place following the heat of the United States. So there's a certain apprehension that I think that's really quite understandable. But both of these countries realize that the world is no longer the world 50 years ago. So the world is pretty much dominated by the interdependence and coordination, given the internet age and given the global village that that is already taking shape. So therefore, the mindset of those politicians and also business people will also have to change with time, so that they are not only there to bring the quality of life for their own people, but also the two largest the economies. They also have the responsibility for the world stability and also economic growth. So now, you know, to follow the topic of the environmental cooperation, I think yes, it is a big milestone that the United States is being nailed down for the Paris Agreement, and right now, these two countries, they have to understand they are the biggest pollutants. So they have to, number one, to really commit to the emission standard, and to improve their technology and share the technology result in a sort of amicable term. And in the meantime, to really explore new alternative and renewable energies. Particularly for China, the excessive reliance on coal is a major issue for China's the environmental problem. I think now, you know, we are also very actively, particularly during the next 5-year plan, actually explore new alternative energies, and also we expect to have some major breakthroughs in having of the new technology being implemented in the power generation.
Well, as we mentioned just now, that the greatest or the biggest contribution that China is making to the world is its own healthy development, or at least the efforts to guarantee that. And in terms of climate change, China, as you mentioned, has been making a lot of efforts and making a lot of measures to develop a green technology, to develop a green industry. And what about the efforts, Aina, of the developed countries?
Well, the developed countries all agree it's a problem, but the problem is that the developed countries are the worst polluters. You know, if you take China and the U.S. together, it's 40% of the world's current CO2 output. So obviously they have a duty to act, and finally that they're doing this. But you asked earlier whether it's about China getting involved in making more rules. I think it's quite the opposite. I think it's China's leading by example, which is going to be the most persuasive way of getting people to follow. The idea that you can beat up on people in countries and make them do the right thing has not worked out. But when countries do make sacrifices, and China is making a sacrifice.
Let's head back to Hangzhou, and we can see that the guests from attending the G20 summit is going into the Caesar Hotel to dine together, and afterwards they will enjoy a very, very nice gala. Now let's get back to our discussion in talking about the efforts of the developed countries towards climate change, towards a green industry. Do you think they're doing enough?
No, they probably are not doing enough, but at this particular moment in time, with the economic situation being the way it is, I don't know that you can expect this.
They're pointing fingers to the developing countries, especially China.
Yes, they do that, but that's a way of evading responsibility for your own actions.
Let me also interject that actually the previous practice for them to deal with environmental problem is to shift those polluting industries to those developing countries. So China was the biggest recipient of the foreign direct investment in that. You know, the heavy pollutants is also concomitantly, you know, moved into China. So now, you know, even those developed countries realize that, well, the village is too small for the small globe. So we have to, you know, we have no really junkyard anymore. So we have to work together to address the issues that are being shared, either in responsibility or in prosperity. So therefore, they come now more in a sort of working mode instead of begging the neighbors sort of mentality.
Well, no matter what problems that are having in terms of relations or any share of responsibilities in the world right now, the purpose of getting all the G20 member countries, as well as so many guest countries, most of them developing ones, in Hangzhou to have this summit is to tackle problems. Then what problems and difficulties are we exactly talking about here?
So number one is I think now it is good after so many rounds of G20, there has been a consensus over what is happening. The slow recovery, and particularly the World Bank has again slashed the expectation for the world economic growth. But the issue is that how really we can move forward. So now during any sort of negotiation, it is really a sort of prisoner's dilemma. Each one expects the other to sacrifice more and to place more on the table before I make a decision to give up some of my benefit. So now we really need, number one, really to look at the entire global issues. So now the primary mission for the G20 again is to prevent another financial crisis. The contingent for financial crisis is not over. So if they are able to prevent the competitive race of quantitative easing, which is now on the agenda of many other countries, Japan is starting to do that. So if they can really kind of resist or desist the temptation of flooding the world with liquidity, so I think that's also a very big achievement. The other is really to make it inclusive, to have the voice heard from those developing countries and least developed countries, because they are the one that has been being victimized by the sort of the partial sort of growth or partial decision making. And now China is, as Tengen said, China is really doing it through example, not only in environment, but also in hosting the G20. And then, private sectors need to be invigorated, not only for innovation, but also to shoulder the sort of responsibility together with those politicians and the public policy makers.
Now, what can G20 do indeed? Because the agreements are not legally binding indeed.
Well, of course, I think now they set up the tone, and now they set up a sort of working group, and and then the next G20 will also take place. So they do not really need to have a party discipline committee to do that.
To supervise.
To supervise, but well, if you really commit to a consensus, to a communique, and you really feel shamed if you really do not deliver. So the other is really to send a strong message for many other parties to implement, particularly the private sectors. They are looking at the directions set forth by the G20, for example, in terms of the PPP, private and public partnership, in terms of the global e-commerce platform, and how the trade facilitation agreement is going to be rolled out, with more ratification. So these are there that they are there to set up the sort of a temperature for the climate of the world business and world politics.
Right, you're watching our special coverage of the G20 summit currently going on in Hangzhou in East China, and now the guests of the summit are now gathering at the very famous Zhejiang Xizi Hotel, the five-star hotel, to dine together. And a moment later, President Xi Jinping is going to give a welcome speech during their banquet. And now let's get back to our discussion with our studio guest, Mr. Liu Baocheng and Mr. Tan.
Ladies and gentlemen, dear friends, in honor of distinguished leaders from G20 members, His Excellency President Xi Jinping and Madam Peng Liyuan, are hosting this dinner.
Your Excellencies, distinguished guests, ladies and gentlemen, friends, this evening, His Excellency Mr. Xi Jinping, President of the People's Republic of China, and Madame Peng Liyuan are hosting this banquet to welcome dignitaries for the G20 Hangzhou Summit. 现在，我荣幸地邀请习近平主席致辞。I now have the honor to invite President Xi Jinping to propose a toast.
尊敬的各位同事，
Dear colleagues, distinguished
女士们、先
guests,
生们、朋友们，
ladies and gentlemen,
大
dear
家晚上
friends,
好。
good evening.
这是一个让人期待的夜晚。
On this much anticipated night,
在20国集团领导人第
we
11
are
次峰
gathered
会
here
召开之际，
by the
我们
Westlake
相聚
on the
西
occasion
组畔
of the 11th G20
我谨
summit.
代表中国政府和人民，
Let me extend, on
代表我
behalf
夫人，
of the government and
并以
people
我
of
个人
China
名义，
and my wife,
对各位贵宾
and
的到
also
来
in my
表
own
示
name,
热烈的欢迎。
warmest welcome to our distinguished guests.
杭州素有人间天堂
Known
美
as
誉
the， paradise on earth,
湖光山色，
Hangzhou boasts
人文美景，
enchanting landscape
俯拾
and
皆
a
是
rich。cultural heritage.
西湖十景
The top 10 scenic
近观
spots of the
或
West
远
Lake
眺，
each have
引
their
人
own
无
unique
限
charm,
遐思。
whether viewed
流
up
连忘
close
返。
or from a distance.
连通这些美景的是
Connecting
一座
them
座
are the
历
age-old
史悠久、造型
and
优
elegant
美的
bridges.
桥。本届峰会
The
会标
bridges
的
are the
设计
very
灵感
inspiration for
就
the logo
来源于
of
此。
the summit.
20国集团就
The
宛若
G20
一座桥，
is just like a bridge
让大家从四面八
that
方
brings us together
走到了一
from
起。
different parts of the world.
这是一座友谊之桥。
It is a bridge of friendship.
通过这里，我们把友
From
谊的
here,
种
we
子
sow the seeds of
播向
friendship
全球，
across the world
增进互
to
信、
enhance mutual
互爱，
trust and
让彼
amity
此的距离
and bring
不再遥
each
远。
other ever closer.
这是一座合作之桥。
It is a bridge of cooperation.
通过这里，我们共商
Here,
大计，
we discuss
加强
plans,
协调，
strengthen
深
coordination,
化合作，
and deepen cooperation
谋求共
for
赢。
win-win outcomes.
这是一座未来之
It is
桥。
also a bridge leading to the
通过这
future.
里，我们同
From
命
here,
运共
We
患
will
难，
forge ahead
携手前
like
行，
passengers in the same
共同
boat
迎接更加美
and
好的明
embrace
天。
an even brighter future.
杭州与在座各位的国家有着
Hangzhou
密
has
切的
close
联
ties
系。
with many of the countries
我在这里提几
represented
个
here.
例子。
Let me give you a couple of examples.
400多年前，1583年，
Over 400 years ago, in 1583, the Italian Matteo
他于
Ricci came to
1599
China.
年记述了
And in
上有天堂，
1599, he
下
noted
有
down
苏
a
杭的
Chinese
说法。
saying, "Up in heaven
据
there is
说这是
paradise,
首个记录
down
传
on
播
earth
这句话
there
的
are Suzhou and
西方人。
Hangzhou." It is believed that he was the first Westerner to record the saying
也是
and
400
make it
年前。
known to the outside world.
德国的
Again,
克雷菲尔
400
德
years
市
ago, the
就从
German
杭
city
州
of Krefeld
开始了丝绸贸易。
started silk trade with Hangzhou.
140年前
140
，1876
years
年的
ago,
6月，
in June
曾经当过美国驻
76,
华大使的斯图雷
Mr.
登先
John
生
Leighton Stewart,
出生于杭
the
州。
former U.S. ambassador to
在中
China,
国生活
was
了
born
50多
here
年。
in Hangzhou. He
他的骨
went
灰
on to
就
live
安
in
放
China
在
for over
杭州
50 years
半山安贤园。
and was buried in Hangzhou.
90多年前，
Over 90 years ago,
1924年4月，
in April
印度诗人泰戈尔先生
1924, the
游览了
Indian
西部，
poet Rabindranath
特别
Tagore
喜欢
visited the West Lake. He liked the lake so much that he wrote many poems about it. One beautiful poem reads, "The hills are shrouded in mist and are embraced by the lake at foot. The water is waving gently with the breeze as if asking the hills to move, but the proud hills stand still." Turnbull also said he wanted to buy a lakeside cottage and spend some time there. Over 20 years ago, in October 1992, the late South African President Nelson Mandela visited Hangzhou. After a tour of the West Lake, he said that he could stay here for his entire life. As we gather in Hangzhou, we have on our shoulders high expectations from people all over the world. We have come here for a common mission. At this critical juncture for the world economy and international economic cooperation, it is imperative that the G20 take the lead and lays a new trail in fostering innovative, invigorated, interconnected, and inclusive world economy and a new round of robust growth. We have come here for closer partnerships. The spirit of partnership and solidarity in times of difficulty is the most valued asset of the G20. We need to follow a win-win approach and work toward the long-term goals of boosting growth and development. It is crucial that we enhance mutual understanding, expand consensus, and form synergy. We have come here for the vision of a community of shared future for mankind. The world today is undergoing profound changes never seen before. The G20 is duty-bound to lead the world forward, drive global development, and contribute more to the cause of common prosperity and progress of mankind. My dear colleagues, ladies and gentlemen, dear friends, the G20 members differ in national conditions and development stages, just in the same way as Hangzhou's sceneries vary from one another. The world economy has its ups and downs, just like the changing weather at the West Lake. It is never easy to handle complexities, but as long as we rise above the floating clouds and look far, we will enjoy the beautiful view of hills and waters. As long as we accommodate each other and stick together, come rain or shine, we will make steady progress and reach our destination together. Hangzhou in autumn, as we can still feel the lingering heat of summer. We can still see beautiful lotus. An ancient poet once said that we can see a vast swath of lotus on the river. We have started our productive discussions this afternoon, and I am sure that much can be expected from our meeting tomorrow. We are here by the side of the Qiantang River. The most charming episode about this river is the rising tides in July and August. We should ride the tide of the world economy, set the pace for world development with our wisdom, and write a new chapter for global economic governance. Now, please join me in a toast to a better future of the world economy, to the G20 cooperation, to the success of the Hangzhou summit, and to the health
干杯！
of all the distinguished guests and your families.
干杯！
Cheers.
Thank you, President Xi. Now, ladies and gentlemen, please enjoy the evening. 谢谢习近平主席，请大家用餐。